Right. Let's get this show on the road. So, just share this. Wait for a few people to log on whilst I'm doing that. Right, I can see a few. How do I do this again? Right, that's it. Alright. Okay. Share to my other page. Alright. That's what I'm talking about. Let's get out of this now. Right, so, Right. Well, we've got a lot of questions, people. Let's just let some people log on whilst I get some of these up here. Let's see. What are we looking at? What is bothering the ummah? What is perturbing some people out there, some folks? Let's see. Right, these questions, where are they? Right, so 57 comments. Right, whoa. I don't think I want to start off with the first question that I saw. Let's see, what questions have we got up here first of all? So, alaikum assalam. Is voting allowed? Actually, you know what, I just realized I could be easier still taking some of these by going through. See, that's the benefits of having two phones, people. Two phones. Right, now let's see some of these. What are people saying? Right. There's so much clicking going into this, going into that. God damn. Come on. Come on. Alright, so look at that. You could see the right, okay. What is the Islamic opinion on the law of attraction? Allah, you're able to influence what happens to you by changing your thought. Fadwa Sa'adi. Right, what a question to begin with. What a question to begin with. Shall we take that? What? You know what I should get? I've just had an idea. All right, look at that. Some love. Right back at you, man. Right back at you. I'm all about the love. All about the love. Right, I know what I should have. I should get one of those kind of buzzers where I say, if I'm going to dismiss the question, or maybe it's got some kind of a chime if I'm going to accept it. What do you think? So the law of attraction, shall we take this? Go on then, right, people. Law of attraction, it does work. I do personally believe, right, okay, now we've got to expand on this. What do I mean by this? I don't believe in this kind of mystical, kind of hocus pocus. Okay. Well, Joanna, shukran, barakallahu feek. The thing is that I don't believe in a hocus pocus kind of thing, but the law of attraction, it's much more than that. Okay, so it's to do with an attitude, a kind of mindset that a person can have. And this then will influence certain events. It doesn't influence them in a kind of, I don't know, a metaphysical way that, oh, I'm thinking there's going to be a tsunami, I'm thinking there's going to be a tsunami, and a goddamn tsunami happens. That's not how it happens. But what it does is your thinking about you will influence your life in real time. Okay, so how does it do this? Now, there may be multiple things. So, for example, multiple nuances that play out. So, if I'm a very pessimistic person, if I always think negatively about myself, if I think about things negatively, there's a great chance that there's a likelihood of more negative things happening to me. Now, this is not down to some mysterious voodoo, but this is due to my interaction with the world around me. So, for example, people can pick up on vibes. You have to remember, we are still creatures. Okay, we are human beings, but we are creatures fundamentally. Animals can pick up on vibes. Like, they can detect things like fear, like a dog can detect fear. Human beings can detect fear, maybe not as nuanced as some other animals, but we can detect these kind of things. So we can detect joy, we can detect confidence. We are drawn to things like confidence. People sometimes, the way we are drawn to confidence and charm, people's malicious side is drawn to fear. Their predatory nature comes out. So if somebody is more afraid of you, sometimes it can turn you into a beast. But that's the evolutionary predatory side inside us. Okay. So hence, people usually, you see in circumstances when people are begging for mercy, they seldom receive it. In fact, the perpetrator, ends up becoming more vicious. And that's like this kind of, once again, like a kind of magnetism of attitudes, that a vulnerability attracts a predatory nature. So when people, so for example, if somebody, and the more they have this about them, the more somebody that has that nature is drawn to that. So what I'm trying to get at is these kind of attitudes give off vibes. This is part of it, so it can influence behavior. So if I'm, for example, if I'm sitting here like going, like this, somebody who is a bit, let's say, cocky, or somebody who's got an attitude problem, or a bit arrogant, or a troublemaker going past, will probably look at me and think, like, seeing me all, will probably be more drawn to doing something, as in, like, maybe picking on me. If I was very confident, like, let's say here I am, sitting confidently, somebody who may have had an attitude won't be drawn to me amongst people. Just because, even if they think that, let's say somebody much bigger than you, who doesn't see you necessarily as a threat, but that attitude isn't what lures them in. So if there was a kind of group of people, they wouldn't be drawn to you. In fact, that attitude would kind of repel them because they see confidence. Now, what I'm trying to say is, you may not have even noticed something. Like, to you, you could just be your normal self. Like, I'm just chilling. And yet, something, for example, an event that could have been problematic didn't occur. Now, because it didn't occur, you don't notice that. But for somebody else, they could be like, why do people always pick on me? But that could be part of the kind of vibes they give out. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but I'm saying that could be part of the reason. Likewise, if you are very confident, very charming, or laughing, or humorous, you attract those kind of people to you. And not just people, opportunities. Because opportunities come through people. People are the kind of, the whole bearers. They bear with them opportunities. Opportunities don't just come, just fly, they don't just float around in the air and you pick an opportunity. They come through people. So people are drawn to people. And they see that, whoa, like there was an old line of a poem actually, وَلِلْقَلْبِ عَلَى قَلْبٍ دَلِيلٌ حِينَ يَلْقَاهُ. That was actually one of the first years back in the 90s, one of the first Arabic poems I heard. But it was speaking about when people, how they influence each other, and the heart has an impact on the heart when it meets the person. So I do believe in the law of attraction like that. It works. I don't believe it to be a turn my notifications off. What notifications? What notifications? I don't see what notifications that is. But anyway, so it's not a mystical thing. It's a real thing. And this, so you get sometimes people saying, oh, I'm Shireen, alaykum assalam. So you get people sometimes saying, like, so-and-so is happy-go-lucky. He's always lucky, or she's always lucky. And that is true. They kind of are when you analyze their lives. But that's not, I mean, it could be that they were just fortunate in certain events, but it's beyond the law of averages that they were always so lucky. But the thing, right, okay, I see. Sorry about that. I'm not sure whether, let me put that on here. I'm not sure if I can, right, so look at that. David, answer is love rational. Alright. Se puede, amor. We have a romantic in our midst, people. Right, so the thing is, look, I'll come back to your question. So this thing is, so people are sometimes happy-go-lucky. And it's nothing so mystical. You just have to change that in there. And this, in Islam, this is why the Prophet Muhammad emphasized it's a bad translation, but what I could say, like positive omens. In Arabic, tafa'ul, being optimistic, being like sometimes not just optimistic, but being like kind of hyper optimistic through things, and the Prophet encouraged that, and he liked it because he knew it had a real world, real time impact positively. But he discouraged and condemned the opposite, negative or superstitions or this kind of negativity at tasha'um. He hated it because it had a real-time impact. And the hadith, there is a hadith that the Prophet said that Allah says, Ana inda abdi kadhannihi bi, that I treat my servant in accordance with his expectation of me. So always think that Allah will do the best for you. And He will. And now if you think, Allah's going to make me suffer, Allah's going to make me suffer, then suffering is coming your way. But if you don't think that, then it's not coming your way. Think good things, God damn it. And good things shall happen, inshallah. So people, all you've got to change is what's in there. That's it. And it will go a long way. Okay, it will impact your lives. Be happy, God damn it. Smile, laugh, enjoy life. Okay, YOLO. That's what hashtag YOLO. And remember, think about it. It is in this dunya. It's YOLO. It's only one life. So, think about it. Right, who's your favorite Qur'an reciter? That's a simple question. Look at the simplicity. Wow. Now that's a very simple, easy kind of... I'm not actually too much into all this, like people are into so many different Qur'an and Qira'at and stuff like this. And I think that's amazing that people have that kind of, they're drawn into things like that. That's, may Allah bless them. But I don't, personally, I'm still old school. So I just really know most of the classics. I don't know a lot of the contemporary Qur'an. I don't know too much. I might have heard of some of their names. I don't follow them so closely. But so I'm still an old school fan of people like Shuraim, people like Sudais, people like Shatari. I love those three. Those three are definitely my top three. So that's old school, but that's what I am. Are you really? Tahir Ali Khan says, are you really Mufti? No, Tahir Ali Khan, I am not Mufti. She is someone else, I'm afraid. She probably just looks like me, that's all. It's probably just the goatee that you're getting confused by. Okay, so don't worry about it. I is not her. So... what do Sunni sources say about the grave of Sayyidina Al-Husayn? Is it really where the maqam is? Husayn radiallahu anh, his grave is disputed by up to I think 3 locations. I don't think there's any absolute conclusivity on where he is. Egypt claims, obviously, around Iran, Damascus. I mean, the thing is Damascus and all sorts, but I don't know where he really is buried, but I think there's definitely 2 and 3, up to 3 disputed locations that I'm aware of. So I'm not sure about the conclusivity. But as far as I'm aware, there is no conclusivity. And there definitely is no conclusivity on any prophet besides the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding their graves. All of these other graves of of Yahya alayhi salam, or of, I don't know, any other prophets, they're not just speculative, they're just most likely, overwhelmingly not accurate. Okay. I have read your answers on Riba. Riba, people, Riba. And mortgages. In light of this hadith, do not even come close to riba. In light of this hadith, haram is haram and halal is halal. Shouldn't we stay away? Well, look, Hassan Abdullah, in my understanding, things like the riba of the Qur'an does not apply to things like interest today. It does not apply to mortgages in our current climate, or loans and things like that. And I've given more lengthier definitions. I've explained, first of all, that the topic of riba is very, very confusing and elusive. It's nowhere near as clear as people would desire for it to be. I explained that beginning with the actual verse of the Qur'an, beginning with just the verse, right down to all the rulings and the schools of law that have derived therefrom. So, beginning with the verse that أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا, that the alif lam in al-bay' is lil jins or lil istighraq. Obviously this requires technicality for you to understand that, but that the alif lam in al-bay' is for all of bay', or the category, absolute, as in the genus, as in transactions by default are always permissible. Whereas ar-riba, the alif lam is not for jins and it is not lil istighraq. That is unanimously. So it is for what is al-ahd al-dhihni in Arabic. It is for what you have in mind when you're speaking about it. And I've gone through this, explained elaborately that how it is not possible to, even then, Riba was so confusing. People today think Riba is so simple. They have no idea, honestly. They have no idea. So, Riba just means excess linguistically, but technically it means something else. And it was one of the things that Umar radiallahu anh said, one of the three things he said, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left this world, and we wish he had given clarity on some matters. Amongst them was the matter of riba. He said, I wish he'd explained this to us. That was one of the sayings of Sayyidina Umar. So the thing is, there's a huge disparity, what has riba, what doesn't. And I've given so many examples in the past, like picking up a mobile phone, swapping one mobile phone with 10 mobile phones. Nobody would call that riba. Apples with oranges, apples with apples. Does that constitute riba? Some will say yes, some will say no. Fruits have no riba, according to the school of Madinah. And I've gone through why this whole thing, day-to-day living in the past, the Qur'an, when it speaks about, condemns those people, يَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ, those people who prevent, Allah kind of condemns them with their neighbours. They do not share, whether it's utensils or help or assistance or even day-to-day food. Like, so if somebody needed a bit of sugar, a bit of flour, a bit of this, you can never return the exact same amount. And you are not required to. So you could say, hey, I borrowed some sugar from you last week. Here's some sugar back. Are you telling me the grains are the same? They're not. Now, then you've got so many of the transactions within the Sharia, things like what they call jizaf or mujasafatan, where you could do, where you had kharas, where, for example, you would just say, you know what, give me everything on the trees, date trees, and you can take this many dates. I think it's about this much. And there's a huge difference, and the Prophet allowed this. And so the point is this. And then there was Ibn Abbas in Sahih Muslim, where he says, he denies that riba is of two categories. It's either right now, what they call tafadul, or it's by deference, where you defer one of the transactions. And he said, when they call that nasa, and he said, you know, that there is no riba al-fadl, la riba illa fin nasa. That's one of Ibn Abbas's statements. This whole thing, and the scholars having no agreement whatsoever on what riba falls upon, to the extent that does money include that currency? You know, certain scholars say money is not, paper money is not from that currency anyway. But the whole point is all of this. It's such a, and today, the essence of it is you put all this confusion into an equation, and then you look at why riba was made haram in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it was made haram based on the fact that it was kind of mega doesn't even quite explain it, but hyper exploitation of the vulnerable. And then you realize that in the society in which we live, although there is exploitation, but it cannot be like that. So it was kind of the riba that was made haram in the Qur'an was a vicious form of, or a tyrannical form of loan shark riba. Okay, so where somebody lends you something, back alley kind of lendings, where there will be murder potentially, or at least brutality. There's overwhelmingly clear that there will be brutality, enslavement, raping. These kind of things were involved. Okay, it's very clear they would come and just take your children, take your wife, take you, kill them. It was just a whole, and compound interest was added. This was the kind of riba that Allah declared war on. Not this other thing that we have within a safe structure. So people say today mortgages can declare you bankrupt, but bankrupt has a pretty safe structure to it, bankruptcy. It's not nothing like loan shark brutality, that brutal or tyrannical loan shark culture. It's nothing like that. So okay, let's so I disagree. Right, let's see. Right, let's Wa alaikum assalam to all the people. Right, a question about praying janazah in absentia. There is ikhtilaf on can this be done. Now, there is a difference of opinion amongst the schools of law. Imam Malik, the school of Medina in general, and Imam Abu Hanifa, who represents the school of Kufa, they were of the understanding that you could not offer janazah in absentia. And this is then opposed by people like Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who feel that you can, because there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ offered a janazah for Najashi, which the incident is recorded, he did, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now, was this a statement that the Prophet was making because Najashi was an incredibly powerful person? And the Prophet was... Absentia means when the dead body is not present. Alright! Rajasa! People, that's my boy right there, Saj. Okay, shout out to you. Yeah. So, the thing is now, in absentia means when the body is not present. So we don't have a body, or the body is present in a different part of the world, but we're going to offer the janazah here. So somebody dies in Pakistan, we're going to get together and do a janazah here, either as well or on behalf of them. So Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa did not accept this, and I personally am in line with what Imam Malik had taught on this. He said that he never, although the Prophet did this for Najashi, he never saw this as a practice in the city of the Prophet. It was not something the companions followed through with. It was not known during other incidents of the lifetime of the Prophet. Neither was it something that the city of Medina was upon. So there you go. So that's what I would follow. That I would say that it's not something that we would normally... I wouldn't advocate it. But if it was to make such a powerful statement, like, let's say there was a great Muslim, like a scholar or somebody who's done great service to Islam. Like, let's say like Muhammad Ali as an example. Now, Muhammad Ali had done a great service to Islam, but people had his body in the United States and they performed a janazah. But let's just say, for some reason, his body wasn't available. Like, he drowned at sea or something, or something happened, unfortunately, to somebody as great as Muhammad Ali, and Muslims weren't around. There's no body, and we can't perform. In that case, I would say, as a symbol, we should do something like his janazah in absentia. Okay, because the person is an exceptional individual for the entire century. It's not just for Muslims and non-Muslims, as Najashi was. He was for Muslims and non-Muslims. So that's how I would accept that. Osman asks, is it better to act like Maula Jatt? Namaya Sonia. That's the people who don't know that. Those, you know what? It's hilarious. I tell you, watching some of those, you know, if you watch one of those like old movies like Maula Jatt, it's an outright comedy non-stop, although it's not trying to be a comedy. So you would just watch it, and the dialogues and the oh man, it's like I'm telling you, it's hilarious. Some of them are on YouTube. You have to sometimes take some time out and just watch them non-stop. I mean, they're not trying to be funny, but they are hilarious. So, Salam, ruling regarding a man and another, what is classed as a vow? Okay, that's correct. Now, the thing is, Zain, a vow is something where somebody says, I vow to Allah that I will do this if this happens. Or they just take a vow. So a vow could be conditional, or it could be just a vow. Okay, so I could just say, for example, I'm just feeling, I know I vow that I will fast, or I will perform umrah, or I vow that I will give so much money in charity, or a vow is an oath that you take, an oath, and you promise to Allah by taking a qasam, a kind of half, by saying, by Allah, I swear, Allah, Ya Allah, by your name I will give this, or I will do this. The thing about that is that it has to be taken seriously. And then there's the other nature to it, which is a conditional vow. So if I say something like, Ya Allah, please, if you do this for me, where you cut a deal, where you take a deal to Allah, you say, let's take it to the table. You say, listen, can you get Allah on the line? Because we're gonna cut a deal. I'm gonna broker a deal here. So you say, listen, so I'll tell you what. I'm going to throw in 2 fasts if you can grant me, if you can make sure I pass my driving test. Layla ji? Papa काम कर रहे हैं. Okay, come on, quickly. Layla, I think, wants to say hi. Can't jal, my Jan. Oh, that's my little Jan, people. Okay. जाओ, ठीक है? चलो आप आराम करो. ठीक. It will work. ठीक है. चलो दवाई खाओ. जाओ. दरवाजा बंद कर दो. Right. So the thing is now. Okay. आप बंद कर दो. So the thing is that now when you try to cut this deal, this second option of saying to Allah that I tell you what, if you do this, I'll do this. This is really this is reprehensible, and the Prophet he reprimanded and this behavior. So he said in a hadith which is in Sahih Muslim that إِنَّمَا يُسْتَخْرَجْ بِهِ مِنَ الْبَخِيلِ, that you are being miserly to Allah, like trying to say, if you do this, I'll give you this. Allah does not need your worship. Okay, so He doesn't need you to broker a deal with Him. If you want to offer something, just do it. Do not broker deals. Okay, so according to the school of Medina, these kind of things are they're close to almost forbidden. They're as in strongly condemned. According to the Hanafi school, you can do that. You can broker this kind of deal. It doesn't mean that Allah will have to honor it, but I mean, I would dissuade and discourage people from taking that line. Okay, if you want something, just ask for it, work towards it. If you want to give in charity, give in charity. Don't try to negotiate. That's how I would say. But if you make a vow, is it binding? Now, the ruling of a vow is the same as a category. It takes as what has been vowed. Okay. What I mean by that is right. Okay. In fact, sorry. Let me expand on that, because I don't think that defines it accurately. If you vow for something haram, it is haram to do. You cannot do it. So if I say, Ya Allah, I swear I'm going to drink alcohol, I can't say, well, now I've got to because I've said I swear I'm going to do it. When you say, go on then, Ya Allah, this one I'm doing because of you. It's like a friend of mine who used to say that. He used to say, oh, I said, Ya Allah, please don't make me do this. Oh, we were like, you do understand that Allah's not making you do it. Anyway, so the thing is, now if you make a vow for something haram, it is haram to carry it out. So if I say, I swear I'm going to kill that person, you can't kill them, okay? If you make a vow for something makruh, so it's not haram, but it's discouraged. I don't know, like let's say, if it's in some way, some kind of discouraged action, whatever it is. Like if you said, look, I swear, you know what, like let's say you promised to help somebody and now you're not going to help them. Now, backing away from that, although it's not haram, but it would be discouraged because you kind of gave them support or you gave them, then this, to fulfill this vow is discouraged. Okay. Now, if the action was a simple, arbitrary, permissible action, then to do the vow is simply permitted. It's not an obligation if it's not an ibadah. Vows really only apply to things which are either encouraged in Islam to do. That's really where they apply. Or, because if they're obligatory, well, they're obligatory anyway. But I suppose you could kind of narrow them down, which you didn't have to. So, for example, I don't have to do Hajj this year, but if I say I take a vow by Allah, I will do my Hajj this year. You see, so Allah had allowed me to do Hajj throughout my lifetime. Now I'm narrowing it upon myself. Right, so now that, in that case, I would either fulfill the vow or I would have to give a kafara. Okay, which is the kafara of an oath. Okay, so you either feed the poor or you fast. Right, so or you fast in turn for that. But the vow for something which isn't an ibadah, which is just a permitted act, an act of ibadah, is not binding. But you can just give the kafara, okay, because it doesn't make sense. So if somebody said, I'll make a vow that, you know, by Allah, I'm going to do a handstand. That's just silly. Right, okay, first of all, the person is treating vows as a joke, so they need to fix themselves. Secondly, these kind of vows are not but they should make the offering, give the kafara, because these are not ibadat. Vows were made for the encouraged acts within Islam to kind of lock them down and to make them a personal obligation for you. Okay, but it's not something people should generally be going down. Okay, that kind of route. I was told voting is haram. Well, that's absolutely not true. Voting is not haram. Okay, so whoever's told you that is misinformed. I would just say stop listening to HT. I swear, I feel sorry for sometimes people like that. I have to say, you know, they devote an entire lifetime committed to this kind of ideology that unfortunately will just not yield any results in the end, and it's kind of it's a shame seeing all that enthusiasm just go to waste. But it's not true. So voting is definitely something we should do, and I think we should do it for Corbyn. Right, Corbyn is a soldier. Right, so Tenga, Nasir saying Tenga, okay. Right, right. Salam Mufti, McDonald's cheeseburgers permissible? No, they're not. I don't buy into this. You see, in the UK, we have plenty of halal outlets, so I don't think it's necessary. I don't believe it's necessary for us to be eating at non-halal outlets. Although I do accept kosher meat is halal. This not, you know, but we have plenty of Muslim halal outlets, so we don't need to in the UK anyway. Right, so let's see. Right, who are? This is going to turn it a bit sectarian. I don't want to really... Okay, I'll come back to some questions. Let's take some of the questions that were already asked previously. Okay, so I pray Jum'ah. Fakhri Burisha has asked, I pray Jum'ah sometimes in a Hanbali Salafi masjid and they're not quite fond of me of my praying style, especially about sadl. Sadl is when you drop the hands at the side, like the Malikiya do, the school of Medina. So should I pray like them or just embrace it? It's the question about the Godfather issue. The Godfather issue, I don't remember that one. So, right, the thing is, it's up to you. In the school of Medina, you can do sadl. Somebody else had asked about qabd as well, which is hanging the arms. I have expanded on that previously. This is an orthodox position that is transmitted by many of the Salaf, including beginning with the companions, whether in the Muhalla, Ibn Hazm says it was transmitted from Sayyidina Ali, but other people as well, Ibn Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, they say, Urwat ibn Zubayr, Sa'id ibn Musayyib from the Tabi'een, Sa'id ibn Jubayr, I believe it was transmitted from Ata ibn Abi Rabah. These are students of, a lot of these of Ibn Abbas. It was the madhab, these were their madhabs, they used to pray like this with the hands at the side, by Layth ibn Sa'ad, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, Hassan al-Basri, Imam Awza'i was one of the two ways that he would pray. It's one of the riwayat of the Hanbali madhab, and the Don of Medina, Imam Malik, it's his madhab, and a few other people. So you can see there's quite a lot of people that prayed with sadl, including the other sects. The Shia generally pray with sadl. The Khawarij, I know that today what's left of them, the Ibadiyah, they pray with sadl. So you can see this has had its presence within Islamic history. So it's nothing to freak out about. Okay. But if you want to do qabd, that's equally permitted. Both are sunnah within Islam. Qabd within the school of Medina could be done through different measures. It could be usually they just say, like the riwayah of Ibn Habib, Al-Maliki is just kayfa mattafaq, however the hands come together. Generally when I'm doing qabd, I just do it like that. So I just kind of place my hand, it's called wada', you place it on the sa'id, as is in some of the ahadith, in Sahih Bukhari and other ahadith. Qabd technically means to hold, so some people hold it like this. You could do that. I don't generally tend to do that. So I just tend to do, but however it comes together, okay? It makes sense, that's absolutely fine. Right, so let's take another question, people. Another question. Please define haram, Allah, and how you derive it. Allah, Yasin Sharif. Right, well, haram is that which Allah has clearly, what we say in the Sharia, what has been made prohibited conclusively. Okay. And we say it's such an abominable act that it deserves, I'm not saying it will get, but it deserves punishment in the afterlife. This is what Muslims believe, that yastahiqul dham wal iqab. It deserves. We're not saying that it will be punished, because Allah could forgive whoever He wants, but this is what it deserves. Now, you have to understand that in Islam, the law of defaults is ground zero, where you begin. Okay, ground zero is the law of defaults. Now, by default, there must be a ruling. It's not that. Now, there's three ways of looking at this. One, okay, this is option one, that by default everything is permitted. It is permissible. This is in line with the verse of the Qur'an, that خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا, that Allah created everything in the earth for you. In the verse, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ, Allah says, tell me who on earth thinks they are big enough to make things haram, and the kind of adornments that zinatallahi fil ard, that, you know, like zinatallah, sorry, that who has made, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ zinatallah التي أخرج لعبادي, who Allah established and gave to His servants, who can make them forbidden? So these kind of verses, the hadith where Ibn Abbas is transmitting that Allah, there's several things He did not speak about, min ghayri nisyan, right? That Allah was not forgetful. وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. He was not forgetful that these things Allah did out of afu, out of a kind of compassionate oversight for you to have, as you can indulge in. Okay. So these rulings set a default. Okay, that things are by default permissible. This is also the view that several Malikiya transmit from Imam Malik, that this is the law of defaults. This is Abu al-Faraj al-Laythi and other people, Ibn Khwayz Mandad and other people have transmitted. This is what Imam Malik believed. This is what I believe. This law of defaults is conclusive. Okay, it has no doubt. It is overwhelmingly established and conclusive. Now, to overturn this law, you need something that is as conclusive. So for example, if there's any doubt, you always return to ground zero. That is your base. So the base is it's permissible unless proven conclusively otherwise. Not through doubt. That the principle that we have in legal hermeneutics or Islamic hermeneutics is al-yaqeen la yazulu illa bil-yaqeen. The certainty of permissibility is only removed through certainty. So you have to prove something as being certain as haram, then it becomes haram. You make an exception, or it's exempt from the law of defaults of permissibility, and this thing is now haram. So that's how I understand, that's how I, adinullah bihi, this is how I practice my deen, and hence the overwhelming things in life are always permissible. Okay. Option 2 is there is a void. The ground zero is no ground. It's not haram, it's not halal, and it's just, you have to, everything has a zero, a ruling. This is the view of certain people. They can live life like that. I find that absurd, but I mean, you can practice that basically ground zero is no ground. It's just a void. To me, that makes no sense, because that means you have to be looking for rulings in everything, and that's not what we see the companions practice. The companions practiced as though ground zero was a ruling. So you see in the Muwatta when Sayyidina Umar goes to with the companions, and this in the Muwatta, and they reach a pond, and they were drinking from the pond and taking things from there, that one of the people asks, he says that هل ترد he says يا صاحب الحوض هل ترد حوضك السباع. Do predatory animals come here because they might be kind of throwing, because it was a small kind of pond, and maybe there's dead animal carcasses or other things that have been thrown in here, and it's polluted or it's impure, but we don't know. So before he could respond, Sayyidina Umar says, Ya sahib al-hawd, says, La tujibhu, do not answer him. He says, فَإِنَّا نَرِدُهَا وَتَرِدُنَا. We go to, we take from where predatory animals take from, they take from where we take from. Leave this alone. Like, we don't want to know. It showed that there was a default ruling, that it existed. The ruling was by default, all things are permissible. That by default, all things are pure, unless proven otherwise. In usulul fiqh, this falls under the principle or the tool known as istishab, and referred to as istishabul hal, the law of defaults. Okay, so if you want to know, that's what I believe. And then some people believe option 3, that all things are impermissible until proven otherwise. Boy, their life must be fun. And so every time they move, technically they need a ruling to say, is it fine? I pick this up, oh, is it fine? I touch that, is it fine? Is it okay to buy this, is it fine? I mean, they need rulings on everything to show that it's not haram. And some other people have tried to add their own little they kind of bylaws into this, in saying, well, okay, all things are permissible, but all this is haram, and all this is haram, and all this is haram until proven otherwise. You say, well, listen, your bylaws, you can take them and place them nicely where the sun don't shine, because those bylaws did not come to me through the clear verses of the Qur'an and the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the teachings of Imam Malik and the school of Medina. And as far as you're concerned, you can keep them. I don't live your life by them. It doesn't bother me the slightest, okay? But make no mistake. Make no mistake, homie. I will not be following those bylaws. Okay, so, right, so that's, I've explained the definition of haram. And how I arrive at it. So hence I tell people that look how ridiculous it is. You say things like, oh, a woman cutting her hair or a woman plucking eyebrows is haram, deserves punishment. I mean, what kind of ridiculous. You see, when you put it in perspective like that, it sounds absurd. And it makes sense all of a sudden. And the deen makes sense all of a sudden. For example, in the masturbation... What the hell, Yasin? You're bringing that issue up again. You said it's okay and there's nothing restricting it. Then the same could apply to other obscenity, such as they've mentioned bestiality, another kind of specific verse-wise restricting it. Okay. Right, no, it does not apply like that, okay? Your imagination needs to be contained, brother. Nutty. The thing is, look, first of all, there is a clear principle derived from multiple laws within Islam, multiple verses of the Qur'an and multiple hadith, which says, La darar wa la dirar. You cannot harm another person or another creature unnecessarily. Okay, you cannot harm animals unnecessarily. You cannot harm people unnecessarily. This is considered haram. Harm. Harm is one of the fundamental things that creatures recognize as part of our morality base. We recognize that harm is something we want to prevent. This is one of the few things that at a base level, creatures and humans, we recognize, those creatures who maybe recognize some levels of morality, and our morality, this is the base of it, that the prevention of harm. So it's not true. And by the way, there are laws about, you asked about animals, where the Prophet said that for making any animal suffer in any way, a person, that the Prophet said that is haram, where he spoke about hunting, that he said that if you were to sacrifice an animal, you do this with, you make sure it's swift, you make sure you do things like this, okay? And there's several, you can read the hadith, you make sure you feed the animal, you do this, you do that, you can't exploit the animal in any way. And there are actually some hadith speaking about things like this as well, prohibiting it, although, you can look into that, whether the hadith have been problematized in terms of their chain, but the ruling is clear. So this is not the same as when you said about masturbation, because I've answered this on several occasions that, look, there is nothing there is nothing in the Qur'an or Sunnah that prevents it. Secondly, the Salaf of this Ummah, many of them clearly said it was permissible, and Ibn Hazm brings their words in his book with an authentic chain, where they said we would actually instruct our youth to do this. But I don't want to really just go on about this issue. So I don't like it constantly coming up, because people made such a big deal out of this. And once again, that's their insecurities, okay? Look, if you have a problem with that, then don't do it. Why does it bother you if somebody else is touching their own body? I mean, why do you feel you have to control them too? Well, the other person is thinking, well, if I'm not going to touch it, you're not going to come here and touch it for me, are you? Unless you've got some kind of a deal going on. So the point is, look, And this is not to you, Yasin, by the way. This is to people who are objecting. That's my point to people who are objecting. Okay, so anyway, some seem to say that kafir is not a derogatory word to refer to non-Muslims who reject Islam. Fiqh books, however, say that a Muslim who even calls this type of disbeliever kafir in order to belittle his sin should be punished. No, I don't think... You see, Islamically speaking, kafir is not a derogatory term. Okay, it's if somebody's a kafir, they're a kafir. You kafir, dirty kuffardom. The thing is, look, it's not... it's become derogatory through some usage. Okay, the term in itself is not derogatory. The term is referring to non-Muslims as kafir. But it does have a word, it has this nature to it, doesn't it? This kind of oomph, that kuffar. But I think it is a shame that it's become kind of almost like an insult. It has become like that. So you say that kafir. But you know what's interesting is previously, in like, so for example, even today in, like, let's say Urdu culture, previously kafir was used a lot in poetry. Okay. And it would refer to, people would often refer to, like, for example, their heart, or the way somebody, you know, that they would often refer to sometimes, like if they're saying a poem about a girl, as in, oh, you know, like she breaks hearts, what a kafir. Like, but it wasn't derogatory. It was almost done in a way to say that, you know, like, wow, to add that awe element. And it was used almost nicely in a way. In a lot of Urdu poetry, it was used like that. So, you know, what's Ghalib says, he says, but I suppose that's for emphasis in that one poem that came straight to mind, that Khuda ke vaste Kaabe se parda na utha zalim, kahin aisa na ho yan bhi wahi kafir sanam nikle. I suppose here it could be used in both ways, that kafir sanam. I suppose you could be referring to the statues, but in Urdu poetry originally the word kafir was not used in it wasn't like an insult, it was just to add awe. And so hence you had it in a lot of the songs as well, the early Hindi songs. They would use words like, what's that famous... you know that, what's that famous old song, that Gulabi Aankhein, that's it. Jo teri dekhi. What's it? He says, but he speaks in there about kafir, about the heart becoming a kafir. But my point is that in English it has nowadays become a kind of derogatory, like people say kafir and stuff like that. So if it is going to cause offense, people can substitute it with non-Muslim or something like that. I think that's better for relations, but it's not derogatory in itself. So in Islam, that's it. Asim ji sharabi ye dil ho gaya. But in there he does use the term kafir as well, in that it's my mind's too drifted at the moment. I can't, it's not coming to my mind, but I mean, you get the drift, don't you? So anyway, what is meant about and stay in your houses? Senior figures from the South African clergy seem to say this means women cannot emerge from their homes except in dire circumstances. How would you respond? You see, Hez Jamrock, the thing is, this verse, وَقَرْنَا فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ, is not... this, first of all, is addressing the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. to see to their duties that they have in their household. And whose household are we talking about? The Prophet's household. Okay, because there were a lot of tasks that fell upon the Prophet household, or the prophetic household, and they were to assist the Prophet in conducting these. Did this mean that, لا تخرجنا من بيوتكن? Is that what it meant? It did not mean that. How do we know this? Well, let's examine the lives of the women in the time of the Prophet, including his wives and other women. They were going out and about all the time. They were doing work. They were working in fields. They were, involved in crops. They were buying and selling in the marketplaces. They were conducting their own. And remember, they were in many ways, that society, I know that it's not the right way to use the term liberal, but in terms of gender interaction, they were a lot more liberal than Muslim societies today. They were very kind of, there was high gender interaction taking place in the prophetic society. They would pray together, they would be in the marketplaces together, women would conduct their own, they would talk to people, organize their own relationships, their marriages, if they were interested in some. You have to remember, this was a society where relationships were very seen as very kind of just natural. So, women, if they liked men, they would just say so. They would get married, they would get divorced, they would go buy, sell, they would meet people. So you see the woman who comes to the Prophet about sitting her iddah, and she says, "Well, I'm sitting at this, this woman's house at the." And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, or this other woman. But what's important is this lady says, I'm sitting this iddah, this waiting period, following a breakdown of a nikah at this house. So the Prophet says, well, a lot of people come and go there, and I suppose you might need your privacy. So why don't you sit it at the house of Ibn Maktoum? He's blind, and you'll have your privacy and you can have your free space. And so she says, yeah, fine. And the point is that in this hadith, the first house she had selected, the Prophet said, a lot of men come and go there, a lot of men. And it showed the interaction. That's it. Salama, absolutely. Shukran, Abdullah, Mamiyat. So the thing, Mamla, sorry. Now, at Salama's house, a lot of men would come and go. So the point is that this interaction that we see was much more common. So, for example, when the Prophet is, he's coming back somewhere, he's on a camel, and he sees a woman, and he says to her, "Listen, where are you headed?" And she says, "I'm headed back into town, into Medina." And he says, "Well, hop on, I'll give you a lift." And she says, "I'd love to." She was carrying these things. She says, "I'd love to, but my husband, he's just a bit insecure like that." And so the Prophet says, "Well, no, not a problem," and he goes. And the point is that, you see, some men, they were like that, but there was nothing wrong with this. The Prophet wasn't saying anything wrong. It wasn't. So this goes to show that the gender interaction in the time of the Prophet was much more natural and free-flowing than it is today. And you get the example of the person saying that, for example, when he says, he comes to the Prophet and he says, "Oh, look, I've done something wrong," and the Prophet says, "What have you done?" And he says, this woman came to my house, she was selling things, and he says, "Well, I groped her and we kissed and we did all of this," and he says, "But then we just kind of stopped." And you see, now this is interesting, because I know Ibn Hajar in one riwayah says, no, they actually had full-on sex. But in this particular riwayah, he says that we kissed and we groped and stuff like this. And he says, and then she went. Now, and then the Prophet says to him, "Well, have you prayed?" And he says, "Salatul Asr," and he says, "Yes." And he says, "Well, consider that an expiation for that." And then he does say in one of the riwayah, he says, "I hope she wasn't the wife of a person in the path of Allah, that's gone out to kind of sacrifice himself for the sake of Allah, and this is what you're doing. But the point is, women were buying and selling, they were trading, they were coming to people's homes, they were doing all of this. The Prophet didn't say, oh right, so what I'm going to do, let me get on the minbar and say, any woman out of her home, God damn you women. He could have done that, but he did not. So what I'm trying to say is, when you look at the picture of Medina, it clearly showed a normal society, not very different from the society we live in today. Except they were obviously great people, companions and so on, but they were still very normal people from that sense. Okay, so, and the South African clergy, seriously, some of them, they are as helpful to Islam as cancer is to a human body. You know, for God's sake, these people, some of them are nutcases, absolute nutcases, who have done nothing but damaged Islam. They are people, some of them are suffering from huge inferiority complexes. And I dig that, I get that. You know, if you grew up with a particular ethnicity and you grew up in a part of the world with all this kind of apartheid going on, and remember, they were people who were not on the side of the blacks, and they were kind of maybe a bit towards the whites, but kind of protected, and now obviously that has broken down. So I know the local blacks the natives are not really too fond of the Asian kind of, which to some extent, I don't know about the generation now, but maybe their ancestors, it may be rightly so, that they took the wrong side of the fence. And now, then on top of that, they only live within these communities. They're not connected to their Indian heritage. A lot of them don't know where they were from, because they've lived, you know, they were sold off as slaves many generations back to South Africans as coolies or whatever. They, you know, they grew up, a lot of them do not speak Urdu. They don't, and some of them speak it as, and some of these scholars that I'm talking about, that I've got in mind, like this guy who runs the Majlis, right? I mean, they're a joke, an absolute joke, and their English is pathetic, their Urdu is ridiculous, they, you know, and they suffer huge insecurity kind of like inferiority complexes. You know, they want to be Paki so bad, these people do. I mean, I get that, I dig that part, okay, because look, you grew up as Indo-Pak, but not being from Indo-Pak, so you want to be that so bad. I get that, okay, but just don't bloody impose your Indo-Pakized version of Islam across the whole world, for God's sake. Nobody's interested. They're radical, hardcore, extremist, some of them. This nutcase, as an example, who has called me a Kafir on multiple occasions. He has an article called The Majlis. And the other, you know, this is the thing that annoys me as well, is that the South African clergy, the others who are not with him, but they tolerate him. And this is unacceptable. This guy has openly pledged allegiance to ISIS. He has said that this is a khilafah, and you can find this article online. I've actually read it. He's openly said that the khilafah, prior to ISIS, he openly pledged allegiance to the Taliban, right? He outlined, condemned, I mean, he considers most of even the South African clergy to be deviants, but the other people like Mufti, Ibrahim, Desai, and these people, right, they tolerate him, and they say, oh, you know, he's a bit hot-headed. Bit hot-headed, mate. Bit hot-headed. This guy's a retard. He has caused Islam so much damage. He openly gives his allegiance to people like Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Raqqa. Right? You tolerating him, saying, oh, he's just a bit hot-headed. He's a bit hot-headed. No, he's not. The guy is delusional and needs psychological help. So I have zero respect for those kind of people from the South African clergy. And he openly insults. He has an article, by the way, this Majlis thing, and in it he is swearing to, insulting, obviously, great people. Mufti Menk, he calls, obviously, he calls him a kafir, calls him a moron, Sheikh Ustad Noman Ali Khan calls him a moron. People like, you've got people on the Maulana Tariq Jamil, who is doing amazing work, calls him a kafir and a moron for being sympathetic to the Shia. He's on that same article, he's got a few other scholars. He's got about me, saying I'm a kafir, that my only status in Islam is that I'm a shaitan. Right, my only status in Islam is that I'm a shaitan, right, and that I'm a moron, kafir, shaitan, and to look at my face is worse than looking at the devil. I mean, and this guy is 80 years old. I mean, for God's sake, you, my friend, are hanging. I mean, what kind of optimism are you going by? I mean, look, I get it. You've had a miserable life. Okay, you lost out on all this kind of stuff. Don't take it out on me. Listen, Pops. Before you kick the bucket, how about you just chill out a little, okay? Anyway, so these people, and there's actually people in the UK that are pushing them and that go and study with them. Can you believe that? Ya salam, honestly. And there's no surprise. And there were some other people doing great work in South Africa, and they've got some institutes, and you see that a lot of the converts, the native black converts, have gone to people like that. They've gone to those institutes. A lot of them have actually even become Maliki, because they could not stand this kind of ridiculous, this kind of ridiculous entrenched infighting. So anyway, my advice is anything they say, you could do the opposite. And that guy, I would just say to him, listen, I don't know whatever it is you're smoking or injecting, but it's giving you the world of confidence and optimism. Because boy, at the age of 80, right, you really are kicking it. So before you kick your bucket, right, just have a bit of shame, for God's sake. A bit of embarrassment. You're embarrassing the rest. Like, you're such an old guy. Like, it's embarrassing to have to speak about you like this. Right, so anyway, Imam Hassan. Allahu Akbar. Ahlan wa sahlan. Speaking of people who are doing legendary work in the UK. Gloucester, that's the place. Right, home of, Fred West. But to counter all that negativity, Imam Hassan doing some awesome stuff. Stay in touch with him. Right, I lost the questions now. Damn. Right, let me get back onto this. Right, here I am. Right, okay, there was a question, by the way, about, in the Qur'an, Allah says that, about insan, that, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ مِمَّا خُلِقْ, that insan should see what he is created from. خُلِقَ مِن مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ, he was created from a fluid that spurts and, I suppose, ejaculates. And it says, يَخْرُجُ مِن بَيْنِ الصُّلْبِ وَالتَّرَائِبِ. The thing is that it is emitted from between the sulb and the tara'ib, and these two places, the point is that what is the sulb and what is the tara'ib? Generally, the mufassirin had said that the sulb here is referring to the spine and the kind of whole, because that's something solid, and it's usually referring to the whole kind of spinal cord, really, or the bone, the whole spine coming down with the vertebrae kind of thing. Now, and the tara'ib is usually referring to what is this point in between the rib cage over here, this kind of, that you get the kind of bone sticking out, and this section here. And it's usually more often tara'ib, which is the plural of either tariba or turib, as a lot of the mufassirin had said, is usually what refers to women. I mean, although you could say tara'ib of a man, but it carries the connotation that it is speaking about women. Okay. Now we know that sperm, for example, is not emitted from here, from the spine, right, or the back. Sorry, the sulb. So why has Allah used this in the Qur'an? And is this a fault in the Qur'an? Okay, well, first of all, this is not a fault. Okay, just to clarify, in this verse, Allah was not trying to, first of all, I'm going to come back to the medical side of it, the biological side of it. But when Allah was using these terms, most of the Mufassirin, the Salaf, clearly understood that Allah was using these to refer to man and woman. Okay, that this water that is emitted from, like this thing from both, and a human is the result. This was what Allah was trying to express. Sorry, let me correct that. This is what Allah had said in the Qur'an, and was in accordance with the expression of the time. It's not that the Arabs didn't know where sperm came from. They knew this, obviously. They knew about things like how animals are castrated, how you prevent fertilization. They knew all of this. They had what you call ihsa of animals, castrating animals. So the thing is, they had all of these things. They knew that obviously the testes, they create sperm. This wasn't something that was unknown to the Arabs of the time. They knew this. Okay. So the point is, just to clarify, right? So first of all, Allah was just referring to that this which is created from man and woman. Secondly, if you did want to get more technical, so it's not that this was already known. This kind of base level, biology was already known by the Arabs. Okay, so just to kind of clarify that. However, when we look at legends like Ibn Ashur, who was an absolute don of the last century, the great Grand Maliki Mufti of really, of almost North Africa and the Maliki world, and especially officially within Tunis, and the Shaykh al-Islam of Tunis of his time. And he has a tafsir in 30 volumes, At-Tahrir wa Tanwir, which is called actually the Enlightenment as well, and the emancipation, the kind of liberation and the Enlightenment. Now, in his tafsir, he discusses this. And this is going back to, remember, the 20th century. He was around up until like the 50s, 60s, like that kind of time. So he's discussing then that, look, if you did want to get biological, you would look at the aspect of things like the HPG axes, right? So the fact that in order to create sperm, there is an axis within the body that is well known now to people. Obviously, the hypothalamus it impacts the pituitary gland, which then impacts the gonads, and it obviously releases the kind of LH or the luteinizing hormones, which then create sperm. So sperm on itself cannot, without the HPG, and within women, cannot be created. And how he speaks about how physiologically that there's subtleties and nuances of variation of how that travels within the body, within the female body, closer to the tara'ib, and with the male body closer to the sulb, the central nervous system. Now, that's interesting. I mean, I'm just saying that is somebody like Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Ashur, who has given that perspective decades ago in the 20th century. So it goes to show, and he said that this was unknown to the Arabs of the time. Unknown to the Arabs of the time. The kind of HPG axes. And how the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, based, back there, is impacting and necessary for the gonads to kind of function. Okay. So, anyway, that's an interesting kind of perspective that I'd like us to be aware of. Okay, so, right. what is my take on what a Mufti said? Yoga has direct links with Hindu philosophy, therefore it is not permissible. Look, this is, I think people become insecure about religion. There's nothing, look, if you want to do yoga, yoga is permissible. Okay. Yoga is simply creating, or meditation is meditation, which is about creating mindfulness. Okay. Being in the ever-present now. If you want to do that, you can do that. Okay, they have developed techniques over centuries and millennia, which, you know, the Hindu tradition has, and Buddhist tradition has. So, I think if you want to benefit from that, there's no harm. They obviously do call out, according to certain practices, to Om. But the point is that, look, if you, obviously you can just eliminate that. You don't need to call out to Om, right? You can, in fact, Zen Buddhism or other meditation practices do not cry out or call out to Om or to the Buddha or things like this. They just focus on the now. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with this. We do not need to become insecure that you're going to become a Kafir. Oh no, you're going to become a Kafir. You know, we have like this kufr phobia. We're like, you know, what's the... You know, when somebody has hypochondria, that's it. So we have this kind of like, this hypochondriac attitude towards kufr. Hypochondria, where they think they've got every bloody illness and disease going. You know, like you get that one person that's like, मैं मर रही हूँ. You get these, oh, I've got this, I've got that, oh no, right, this. So the point is that you get this going on, and you get some of these old aunties that are like hypochondriac, and they feel they've got like every illness going. Like, this is my last, bas, kalma par lu. This is it. This is it again. Right, but so the thing is, everybody's like rubbing their palms and rubbing their kind of soles, and they've got like a glass of water. This is it. Surah Yasin parlo. Everybody read Surah. This is the grand, off to the great unknown. And if you and if you had that old Bollywood kind of, you know, like you couple that with the old Bollywood diagnosis, medical diagnosis. Anytime a doctor would walk into the house where the lady was sitting there, and he would just check her kind of pulse, and he'd go, "Mubarak ho, aap maa banne wali ho." You think like, so you couple that in this situation, that the auntie's about to go and the doctor comes in, he goes, "Mubarak ho, maa banne wali." So you think the only way the doctor could have known that in those movies is if he was if he was responsible. Nutty. So he say cha, mashallah, take cha. So anyway, coming back here. So we have this hypochondriac attitude towards becoming, not towards becoming pregnant, but towards kufr, becoming a kafir. Okay, so we think everybody's going to become a damn kafir. Oh my God, I did this, I'm going to become a kafir. Oh my God, I'm a kafir again. Oh my God, I'm a kafir. It's like, chill out, dude. It's like, can you just chill out for a moment? Seriously, you know, this iman isn't that weak. So the same thing with all these reactions, and people need to, and you know, with blasphemies, and it's a shame really what we've done to Islam. We've turned it into a laughing stock. This thing was, you know, this thing in Indonesia with the whole, where the Christian minister, where they kind of did him for blasphemy. honestly, I'm shocked. I'm against all kind of corporal and capital punishments and things like that. But I would love to see the people pushing that have them publicly flogged. I mean, what is wrong with you? Why are you dragging religion into everything? You know, why do you have to bring religion into everything? It's like, you just say, har baat mein ghusa dete ho. It's like, why do you, Islam, you know, kuffar, just relax. Okay, let the guy isn't a Muslim. All he said was stop trying to peddle religion with politics. That's all he said. And, you know, oh my God, he said people are misusing this verse of the Qur'an. Oh my God, why do you talk about the Qur'an? Why lock him up? And I think they gave him 5 years. Or I think 2 years at least. It's between, I can't remember now. I read the article, but God, ya salam, what has the world come to? Seriously, what has the world come to? Right. Does the talaq of a tahir constitute an immediate divorce, and what's the iddah for that? Some say he must fast 2 straight months to get back with her. Right, well, Jones Darnell, right? No, I mean, a talaq that is issued does take effect, but he can revoke the talaq, as in he can get back together. These things shouldn't be treated lightly. If a person does want to do a talaq, he should think about it. You know, just chill out, have a breather, get people together, have some witnesses, put it on paper. Try to have a mutual understanding. That's what I would say. Okay. Right. Why do women have to sit iddah if they've been separated for over a year? Is it just pregnancy related, or are there other hikmah behind it too? Sughra, you see, I think there's many other things as well. I think iddah has its wisdoms. And you have to remember that if a woman applies for a talaq, there will be an iddah once the talaq has been issued. Now, if the talaq has been issued via an Islamic council, then depends how long she's waited. Maybe she could just sit out 1 menstrual cycle and leave it. Otherwise, generally they say 3 menstrual cycles. Listen, the only prohibition she has is nikah. Everything else carries on as normal. That's the opinion of the school of Medina and certain other schools. I know it's not the Hanafi school, but that is the position that I take as well. Now, one of the wisdoms in iddah is also to prevent a lot of further kind of backlash. Because when a woman pushes talaq, usually, and you've got to remember, this is a global, we're applying this to the whole world, right, and looking at it. What is the reaction of many men? Many men are unfortunately, and women are as well, but many men are insecure. Human beings are insecure. Now, some people, even if they've been separated, they unfortunately are too insecure to let people go. So, as soon as the woman says, I want out, what do you get in a lot of societies? What will a husband say and suspect? In a lot of societies, unfortunately, he will say, so he will say, you've got another guy. This is what happens. Okay. Now, there's nothing wrong technically in her having found someone else. There's nothing wrong with that. But what this usually, because it could be that she's separated, now she's found somebody else and she wants a talaq. And that's fine. But the point is, because she wants to be with the other person, and that is fine. But the point is, what will the guy say now? I'm just telling you what happens, unfortunately, in many of the cases. And it's unacceptable, but this is what we see as a global phenomenon. A lot of people will say, oh my God, you've got another guy. That's why you want this talaq, so you can just marry this other guy. Then this will lead to, I bet you were seeing him whilst we were together. So what happens is, the moment the talaq is granted, if this is one of the wisdoms as well, if she was to do an immediate nikah with someone, it could unfortunately lead to great, at the lower end, disputes, at the higher end, bloodshed. So to prevent this, Islam just placed a buffer zone, one which is not incredibly lengthy. It's only, 3 menstrual cycles. And it created a buffer zone in which she can accommodate, now get used to normal life. The husband, it can sink in within days and weeks. Sinks in, she's separated. She gets a routine going. Life is as normal. She can do herself up. She can be herself. The only prohibition is nikah. Then another person can come into the picture. It's not the end of the world. And if she happened to be pregnant as well, that will also manifest. Bypassing this can create unnecessary problems which are of such catastrophic measures that it's not worth the Sharia neglecting it. So the Sharia has to rule in favor of the greater good, okay, to safeguard people. Because this happens all too often. Somebody asked a question, how is that okay when she's still married? Look, it is okay because you have to remember that marriages are not monotonous. They're not like everybody's marriage is not the same. So it could be that people have broken off, that their relationship has broken down. Now, as their relationship has broken down, a husband, it could happen to a husband, it could happen to a wife, that they want out of the relationship. It could be that they like somebody else. There's nothing, look, this isn't haram, liking people. You could like somebody else. You could like hundreds of people. You could like 10 people. You could like 3 people. You could like 1 person. You could liking people is not haram. Okay? You could think that, look, a relationship has broken down. This ain't working. There's only arguments, bickering. Maybe they've even had separation. She feels that, look, I don't want to be in this. Let's say she did like somebody else and she thought, you know what, if I wasn't married, I would like to be married to that person. There's nothing wrong in that. this is her life. She can live it. You don't own her. She's not your possession. So I think, look, this kind of like, oh, how can she like someone else? She happens to be married to me. Well, get real. Let's be honest. How many do you like? Let's be honest. I mean, you must like 10 loads of other women. So what's the big deal here? If she happened to like another guy, okay, if she liking in itself doesn't equate to doing. It doesn't mean she's off on some kind of sexual escapade with the guy. It just means that, she might be drawn to another. But the woman came to the Prophet. She said, I like the other guy. She said, my other husband, I used to be with him. I like him. I want to go back to him. And the Prophet says, what about this guy? She says, I can't stand him. The Prophet said to her husband, divorce her. So the point is, look, now, somebody said here, how is that fine when she's still married? During her iddah period, she's not allowed to. Right, the thing is, look, during her iddah period, she is allowed to make contact with males, people, chill out, right, relax. Right, iddah, okay, is of 2 types. Okay, let me clarify this. Iddah is of 2 types. Now, the Hanafi madhab disagrees on this point. They consider iddah of 1 type. The other schools all recognize iddah to be of 2 types. They say an iddah is a waiting period. However, there is an iddah for a divorcee and there is an iddah for a widow. The iddah of the widow has what we call ihdad or hidad in the Sharia, which is the absence, which is a state of mourning. Not like being in the morning, but M-O-U-R-N-G. Okay, so mourning, okay. Now, the thing is, see, there goes my spelling at this time, but mourning, I-N-G, sorry. Right, the point is that, look, now, when your husband has died, as you can imagine, like let's say somebody's husband is this scenario I gave you about the iddah and having ihdad. Sorry, this thing of when you're in what I said about having disputes and people's suspicions of you having an affair. These can be much more intense if the husband was killed or died. And I've actually witnessed this with people. So, when somebody had died, one of the worst things to the family of the deceased, the immediate family of the deceased, so like let's say the brothers, the sisters, the father, the mother, the immediate family of the deceased, one of the worst things that the widow could say at that point when the husband has died is, oh, I'm going to get married right now to another guy. This will, unfortunately, trigger, it won't begin with a dispute. This will, in most places, unfortunately, this will trigger violence. And in many cases, unfortunately, bloodshed. Because people will think that, oh my God, my so-and-so just died, and the only thing you can think about is getting off with another person. So this is taken as an absolute affront and insult. So it's very important to safeguard this woman at this time. The Sharia is trying to safeguard her. So what it placed, and it doesn't even want, because when somebody is killed or dies, and especially if they're killed, right, there is sometimes a glance of suspicion that is casted towards many people. And they think, and one of the people that they always, that unfortunately may get it, is the people who are close, like the wife. That, I wonder if she was in on this. I wonder if she hated him. Didn't she used to always argue with him anyway? So what the Sharia did as a safeguarding measure is it imposed ihdad. That during this period, stay put as much as you can. If you have to work, you can work, but socializing, cut it down. Chilling out, cut it down. Shopping, cut it down. Makeup, adornment, cut it down. Don't cut it down, stay away from it. It prevented adornment. Don't do yourself up. Don't. This, and it stretched the period. Not 3 menstrual cycles, 4 months, and it added an extra 10 days of waiting. Now you have to understand that there was a wisdom to this. Because this would safeguard her absolutely. Because people are sometimes angry and they behave irrational when somebody of this has died. Like if somebody's brother had died and now he sees his wife she's always out chilling, she's in the market, she's done herself up. Now you see that anger may get wrongly redirected. So the Sharia placed ihdad and the state of mourning for the widow, not for the divorcee. So, but it just placed a waiting period and a prohibition of nikah, that's all. So just to clarify that, okay? Now, that is, so a woman in divorce, but the Hanafi, I recognize the Hanafi madhab didn't make that distinction. It applied the iddah of a widower to all iddahs. But that, the Hanafiya, that's them. The majority of all the scholars disagreed with them on this. As far as saying, scholars said that a woman shouldn't really be speaking too much about marriage during her iddah. That is true because it's to safeguard her. So a woman shouldn't be kind of like outright advertising, because why would there be a prohibition of nikah unless it was to safeguard her? So her going around announcing and trying to say, hey, people, come marry me, it goes against this whole concept of safe keeping her safe. But if she happened to have somebody in mind, there's no harm in her kind of having that understanding, but she's not allowed to conduct a nikah during the iddah, this buffer zone, so the family can adjust and she can adjust. Okay, so I hope that helps and shed some light. And people, we have to recognize that we have to let go of many patriarchal cultural aspects. And this was also the wisdom between when people said, oh, there's a difference of opinion that during the iddah, what is she entitled to? There's a huge difference of opinion. Is she entitled to maintenance, expenses, and housing? Or is she entitled to just one or the other? Or is she entitled to none? And there's a huge difference of opinion from the scholars. But the point is, when scholars, or when those who understood that she should stay put in his house, this was based on that understanding of safeguarding. Today, that in this part of the world, that would actually be detrimental. Unless they were thinking of reconciling. Unless they wish to reconcile, she should not just stay in his house, because it's only because they've divorced. Obviously not if he's dead. If he's dead, then I doubt it reconciling is going to happen. But the point is, if he's divorced her, if they're hoping to reconcile, maybe then they could stay in there. But right. But the thing is, otherwise she should just move out, because it's not going to go anywhere pretty. Okay, she's only going to be kind of insulted and stuff like that, and so it's better that she just moves on and she lives life as normal. Okay, when bad things happen, are these 1, a test from Allah, 2, from the shaitan, or 3, are they sent to clean our sins? Okay, this is an interesting question, Kay. Now the point is that when bad things happen, we have to understand whether Allah designed certain things to happen, we would never know until they've happened. Okay. The fact that it's happened and you are being patient can be viewed as a test from Allah, but it doesn't mean that Allah selected you for that to happen. The bad things that happen in our lives are either a result of our own choices or a result of the laws of nature playing out. Okay? Or the doing of somebody else. So they are not Allah doing bad things to us. So if somebody had an accident, that's because, if somebody, for example, had a car accident, that's because somebody else was carelessly driving. Okay, or you were carelessly driving, or whatever. It's not. But now that it's happened, you could see that, okay, now that this has happened, if I'm patient, Allah will reward you. And because you're undergoing some suffering, as a token of compassion from Allah, He will also clean your sins due to your forbearance of this unfortunate event that befell you. It's not that Allah caused it. Okay, it was human free will. Where things like cancer have happened or occurred, and may Allah, help and free anybody that has suffered or is suffering from these things, from these illnesses, and cure them swiftly and completely, Ameen. But where these illnesses have happened, it's a result of DNA that you have inherited in interaction with your environment. So it could be that you have certain latent kind of DNA that whilst these cells are obviously reproducing, that the cellular reproduction goes haywire. Why does it go haywire? It could be due to certain kind of genetic inheritances. It could be due to the interaction in your environment. Your environment. It could be that you are eating certain carcinogenic foods which are kind of triggering cell or malicious cellular reproduction, or it could be you are exposed to certain rays that cause that, or it could be a combination of your genetic dispositions in combination with that. But these are not from Allah. Okay. The fact that it happens and you are suffering, it is a token of compassion from Allah that He will now take that suffering as a test. That you, whatever you do, are patient with, Allah will forgive sins abundantly in lieu of that patience, and He will reward you abundantly as a token of His compassion, but not because He made you suffer. It is a misunderstanding of many Muslims that they believe that Allah has made us suffer. And I think it's a disservice to the magnificence and the overwhelming infinite compassion and gratitude and blessings that Allah showers upon us, that we in turn redress Him by saying that He has done evil unto us. I find that a disservice and an oxymoron and just an outright just an arrogant almost response to the blessings of Allah, who says, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, and which of the blessings of Allah do you deny? To turn around and say, you have caused this to us. He has not caused that to you. You may have fallen victim. He does tell you to stand strong. And can dua cure these things? I've answered this, that I do believe that dua can have interaction, but it almost has it in a way like the what is called the Copenhagen interpretation for quantum physics, that upon observation the quantum realm collapses. You see, when you're observing something, sometimes it then won't happen. But sometimes Allah may, you may have divine, there's what I've called strata or stratum of intervention, divine intervention into our daily lives. I think it's very difficult for us to understand, and this is why I think by understanding things like quantum physics, we are having a greater understanding of maybe how the divine interacts with us. Because I would advise people to watch something on YouTube and to learn about the quantum eraser, and how in quantum mechanics, at a quantum level, atoms and electrons, subatomic particles like electrons, how they rewrite history in accordance with our actions. So, and it rewrites it. It's amazing. It actually does it. It's bloody phenomenal, but it's tested. It actually rewrites it right there based on what you were. If you watch the delayed choice experiment, it will show that. So I think Yassar Allah, may Allah make things easy. But we do not blame Allah. Okay. You see, somebody said, well, what does verses of the Qur'an protect us from? Well, maybe it's part of that choice. You resorted to certain things and Allah gave you blessing. And you have to remember that, look, some of these things, there's a ritual to them, which is important. There's also the mindset. They are important for many people. And whether they prevent harm or not, I guess you'll never know. You understand? But what they shouldn't do is become a superstition. So it shouldn't be like, oh my God, I never read Ayatul Kursi today, something bad is going to happen, something bad is going to happen. That is exactly the opposite. That is what Islam came to get rid of. Okay, so that's not what it should be, but hopefully, it will, in my understanding, these things tie into my first question of, and I think with this we can call it a wrap. It ties into the first question of the laws of attraction, that it helps through its blessing to create that positive vibe, which then bring on more positivity. Okay, and that's how you believe you are protected, and Allah says, "Ana inda abdi ka dhannihi bi." I will treat my servant accordingly. He feels that he is protected, so I shall ensure that he is protected. Look, it's difficult for us to truly understand these things. I get it. I get it that we want to understand. You know, I get that. But sometimes, you know, people have struggled with this. Some of the greatest minds have struggled with it. It's not easy to just have an absolute answer, right? But these answers, I hope they make some sense. Right, somebody asked about they're taking medication due to spinal injuries. Are they exempt from fasting? Yes, they are. If they need to take that, that's fine. They can be exempt. I'm not sure how the medicine is taken, to the extent that some ulama have said you could even just swallow that medicine and keep your fast if you wanted to. But if you needed water, then when those ulama, there's some, I know they're an absolute minority, but some have said, I believe there was a scholar by the name of Abdul Bari from Morocco who gave the fatwa that pills consumed just on their own without water would not violate the fast if they were necessary. But what I would say is that you are exempt at the very least from fasting, and if you can even act on his fatwa, but that's fine. Okay, so but you're definitely exempt. Why do I love Birmingham? Birmingham is awesome, people. That's what I'm talking about. Birmingham is it. It's lit. No, it's an awesome city. It's the heart of the UK. There's a great thriving Muslim population. It's not totally so spread out that, like London, that it takes 1.5 hours to get to the other side. It's not that crammed with like traffic, but at the same time, it has over 1 million people in it, so it gives you the personalization to live a private life. You know, you don't have to live kind of a separate life, or I mean a kind of village mentality. It is the second largest city in the UK. So I think, so for these reasons, throw in the fact it's actually quite 24-hour now. I mean, we have 24-hour gyms now, 24-hour steam rooms, people. All right, 24-hour food places. I mean, I've seen some of my friends from London, when they come here, they say it's actually much more easier to get food late at night as a vampire than it is in parts of London. I don't know how true that is for them, but that's how their experience is. So it is awesome. That's what I'm talking about, people. And to get from one place to another is still within reach. 15 minutes, you're there. 10 minutes, you're there. You know, everything. It's not like London. I gotta bloody... and then I can't park. So that's why, to me, it's awesome. And then on top of that, it's actually on high land, I believe. So it's quite protected from floods. Somebody asked a question, right? I'm going to finish it off with this question. Somebody asked a question about Nuh alayhi salam and him being right so old, and right, and is that, could I speak a bit about that? Now the thing is, Nuh alayhi salam being, you know, just under 1,000 years old, as the Qur'an explains. The thing is that some people believe, based on this, that all the people alive then used to live that long. Right, my understanding is that's not true. The thing, Umayyad just made a comment, right? The thing is, my understanding of that is that yes, Sayyidina or Nuh alayhi salam did live whether we want to call it a miraculously long period of time, but that was his miracle. Okay, that was his miracle. People around him were dying, and they would always just see him as this old man. So it's like they, you know, like let's say people are growing up, like I'm growing up, and this guy's an old man, and as I've become old, he's still just an old man. And then I die, and my children... So everybody just remembers him as an old man. Maybe they're not fully aware how old he is. Because, remember, this is... It's at least several thousand years back, this is. So people back then probably weren't keeping dates that well logged. But they were aware that he was an old man. And he's always going on, and he's always trying to call us to this God. And Nuh alayhi salam says, you know, inni da'awtuhum, that I really called them, you know, openly, wa asrartu lahum israra, and quietly I called them. And then, you know, like I tried to save them from this thing that was coming. But they obviously they deny Nuh alayhi salam. And the interesting thing is that, you see, the interesting thing is that Nuh alayhi salam in the Qur'an, he says, he asks Allah in his dua to destroy them then. And this was almost out of frustration because it had enough. He says, وَلَا تَتْرُكْ, he says, and do not, وَلَا تَدَعْ مِنْهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ دَيَّارًا, and do not leave a single one of them that dwells around us here in the earth. And Nuh alayhi salam's flood, by the way, was not for the whole world. It was only for his region. Okay. Now, the thing is, it's interesting that how could Nuh alayhi salam, how could he make such a dua to Allah? How could he say to Allah to destroy them? This is the question, because a prophet of Allah, a prophet of Allah is not supposed to, we're going to say he's not supposed to give up on his people. Isn't that true? Like, he's not supposed to give up on his people. So how does he make that dua? How does Nuh alayhi salam make that dua? And let me read it to you. The thing is, he says, when he warns the people, that he tells them that Allah yursilu sama alaykum idra, that he will, and he reminds the people of Allah's blessings, saying that Allah will, that this flood will be coming. Look at how Allah has blessed you with wealth and children and things like this. وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ جَنَّاتٍ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ أَنْهَارًا مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَرْجُونَ لِلَّهِ وَقَارًا وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا. And this is interesting, that he says, and Allah has created you in stages. Now, what's interesting is this may also refer to evolution, but I don't think whether it does in this particular point or not is a bit irrelevant. But this is, my personal understanding is here Nuh alayhi salam was pointing about humanity in general and was referring to the evolutionary stages of mankind, of humanity. Because he then goes straight to the heavens. Alam taraw kayfa khalaqa Allahu sab'a samawatin tibaqa. Do you not see how Allah created the heavens in this great kind of, in this majestic kind of layers? And he says, وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا, and the moon and the sun, and وَاللَّهُ أَنْبَتَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا. See, this is another interesting one. Once again, tying into evolution, but I don't want to go there. Wallahu ambatakum. He made you grow out of the earth. Ambatakum min al-ardi nabata. Ambatakum min al-ardi nabata. Nabata. Right? Like, as a produce. Like, but anyway. So, ثُمَّ يُعِيدُكُمْ فِيهَا وَيُخْرِجُكُمْ إِخْرَاجًا. Do you not see that Allah will return you into the earth and bring you from it again? وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ بِسَاطًا. And He gave you all of this. لِتَسْلُكُوا مِنْهَا سُبُلًا فِجَاجًا. But then, you see, they still disbelieved. And the Qur'an says he was under 1,000 years, 950 years. ألف سنة, he was 1,000 إلا 50, except 50 years. And then Nuh alayhi salam says to Allah, Rabbi innahum asawni, they have disobeyed me. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْهُ مَالُهُ وَوَلَدُهُ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. And they only followed those who gave them great misfortune. وَقَالُوا لَا تَذَرُنَّ آلِهَتَكُمْ وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ وَدًّا وَلَا سُوَاعًا وَلَا يَغُوثَ وَيَعُوقَ وَنَسْرًا. And they said, do not leave these false gods of Ya'uq and Nasr and Yaghuth and all these other false gods. And he says, وَقَدْ أَضَلُّوا كَثِيرًا وَلَا تَزِدِ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا ضَلَالًا. Okay. And here's the interesting thing. He says, مِمَّا خَطِيئَاتِهِمْ أُغْرِقُوا. By their own wrongdoing, they have now been drowned. Meaning in sins or in misfortune, Or you could be speaking about the actual flood. فأدخلوا نارا فلم يجدوا لهم من دون الله أنصارا وقال نوح رب لا تذر. He said, Ya Allah, do not leave على الأرض من الكافرين ديارا إنك إن تذرهم. Do not leave a single one of them, of the kuffar on the earth, that can, like, from these people that he's talking about, the kuffar, them. إنك إن تذرهم, if you leave them, يضلوا عبادك, they will set forth, they will يضلوا عبادك, they will misguide your servants, which shows there will be other servants that will still be alive. So the flood wasn't for everybody, it was for these particular kafir, right, kuffar. Now, إنك إن تذرهم, if you leave them, they will misguide your servants, the other people. وَلَا يَلِدُوا إِلَّا فَاجِرًا كَفَّارًا. Right. And then he says, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِمَنْ دَخَلَ بَيْتِيَ مُؤْمِنًا وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ وَلَا تَزِدِ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا تَبَارًا. And he says, bless me and my family and those who come to my household, and destroy the oppressors. Why does Nuh alayhi salam say, if you leave them, they will وَلَا يَلِدُوا, and they will not give birth, إِلَّا فَاجِرًا كَفَّارًا, except to people who are oppressors and excessively disbelieving. How would he say that? How does he know the future? How does he know that? So one perspective is, oh, he's just guessing, like he's just feeling this is the vibe. That's one thing. The other understanding which I take is because due to his miraculous age, he had seen offspring upon offspring being born in front of him. And he had seen that yet they excessively disbelieved. Like to them he was always this old man. They grew up, became old, died, grew up, became old, died, grew up, became old, died. He was this old man, but they would not believe in him. So he saw that, look, I've seen this for almost 1,000 years. This pattern is not going to break. If you leave them, لا يلدوا, they will not give birth, إلا فاجرا كفارا, except to except to tyrants who excessively disbelieve. So, and the fact that how was he allowed to live this long? Look, even today, scientists, this is today with our technology, we are discovering how to kind of reverse aging. Like today, scientists have already made things like worms outlive 6 times their lifetime. And they have discovered how to send humans into hibernation for at least 100 to 150 years without cell destruction. That is today, we already know this. So for Allah to have, for Nuh alayhi salam to have outlived humans of his time for up to, let's say, 10 to 12 times, by his, cells defying, or at least a very slow aging or cell destruction process, is not impossible for us. Okay, so I feel that, look, this was his miracle. Okay, people, with that, I'm going to leave you to it. It's been, we have hit midnight. I am feeling a gym session. I am feeling a steam room session. I got to call it a goddamn night. Right, so, people, like this Facebook page, share it, spread the love out there, people, right? If you are on Facebook, feel free to send me your questions. If you're on Snapchat, Malm2014, MALM2014, right? Send that to me, inshallah, right? Somebody said a little bit of Urdu, right? Well, okay, then how about, in light of everything I've said, what goes down with अब जिसके जी में आए इससे ले रोशनी हमने तो दिल जलाकर सरेआम रख दिया. Wah! Wah! There you go, people. Right, so I'm gonna love you all and leave you with that. Take very good care of yourselves. I'll see you all next week. Stay blessed. والحمد لله وتعالى الله عما يصفون وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على القائل الممنون المدينة خير لهم لو كانوا يعلمون. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.